Hello, you're listening to Create Tomorrow, the WGSN podcast. I'm Carla Buzasi, CEO of WGSN, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our very final podcast of 2020. Throughout this very strange year, myself and WGSN Insights, Peter Marion, have taken it in turns to host this podcast. But for the final episode of the year, the tables were turned, and my colleague, David Davies, who's Chief Content Officer of WGSN's parent company, Ascential, instead quizzed me on my highlights and lowlights of the year. You'll hear about the innovations I'm most proud of and what kept me and the team going these past 12 months. So, without further ado, let's start the conversation.
Hi Carla, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Staring down the end of what's been a very long, strange year.
Yeah, well, 2020 has been a very turbulent year. Where do you think you really succeeded at WGSN with helping clients through it?
I think there was a lot of reassurance needed early on. Lots of companies hit panic buttons, and that was unsurprising when you think back to the headlines in the newspapers. I mean, the headlines that are still in our newspapers now. But people worried. In some countries, staff were put on furlough, shops were closing, they couldn't get people into factories to make items, even if consumers were going to buy them. And what we needed to do was to be on hand, be as helpful as we possibly can, and come back to what we're here to do, which is help them understand consumers better and their behaviour and the kind of products that they're going to want to need in the future. And those products changed substantially this year, but also the way that they were going to purchase them changed as well. So we had to be nimble. We had to reassure and we had to provide as much insight and analysis as we could in what was a very fast-moving world.
If I take you back to the beginning of the year, you obviously had forecasts planned for 2020. You didn't see a pandemic coming, obviously.
No, I'm afraid we did not predict coronavirus, or certainly not the extent of this. But what's been fascinating is lots of the macro trends that we did forecast were exactly what's happened. It's just they were accelerated massively through this. And one which I go to quite often, just because it's quite a kind of easy and obvious one, is we've been talking about the rise in home working, virtual offices for some years now. All the signs were there. And what the pandemic has done is has accelerated that and pushed people into testing it. And what we're going to see is, even with vaccines coming, is that change is now it's just part of our day-to-day. We've learnt to live and work in a very different way. So I think that was what was fascinating to me, and, very reassuring that the WGSN experts absolutely know what they're talking about.
Even through a pandemic. Fantastic. There's been a lot of innovation. I was very impressed how casually you mentioned at the exec the other week about how, we just re-platformed the site. And I was thinking, well, like in other years, that would have been like a huge monster item. But it was one of many that you really executed this year. And I wonder what you thought about what has been the catalyst for being able to drive so much change when people are working remotely. It's a different circumstances, very dislocating. There have been a lot of challenges this year, and yet a huge amount of innovation. Do you think those two things have gone together for you, or how's that happened?
I think there are many answers to that, but actually I think what it's done is everyone's been tested this year, right? And what my amazing team around me at WGSN have shown is just how resilient they are. And people have gone above and beyond every single day, whether that's supporting clients in our client services and account management teams, or, completely updating what we do in terms of the content, the analysis we deliver, or how we deliver it. And, very early on, it became clear that people's food and drink patterns were changing massively. And we'd always planned that we would launch a dedicated platform for that industry. Well, we brought it forward really, really quickly because we could see these manufacturers of food products suddenly were, my good, people are eating different things. They aren't going to restaurants, but they want to be able to produce things at home. And so we hauled that launch forwards. But at the same time, our fashion clients needed to understand, well, if people aren't in offices, they're not going to shops, what clothes are they going to be wearing? How are they going to buy them? So everything we did had to change very, very fast to ensure that the businesses that use us were going to survive through this.
The clients that you've been working with, what How have they impressed you? You know, who has stood out in their ability to pivot and change in what has been a very difficult time?
I think early on what was very interesting was it was more the kind of the single, startups, the makers of this world who very quickly put innovation front and centre of what they were doing. I remember there was an architect firm in Amsterdam that very quickly created this model for an outdoor market that could be replicated very simply anywhere in the world, which would restrict the number of people who could go in and buy, and kind of created a plan that anybody can use. And it was really fascinating to see that happening on a large scale. There was an individual who created a new way of opening doors, which meant that people wouldn't put their hands on it. And so it was more the small companies at the beginning. Some of the larger companies took a little bit of time, but what we have seen, and I would say this is the kind of second half of the pandemic, the last 3-4 months, we've seen a lot more on that front, those big businesses whole scale changing the kind of collections that they're creating. In any normal year, in the fashion world, it would be all about sparkly dresses and high heels. What are you going to wear to the office Christmas party? What are you going to be wearing for holiday celebrations? And instead, it's now, beautiful loungewear, relaxing things that you can wear in home, beautiful slippers, but that look stylish. Some of the fashion companies took a little bit longer to get there than others, but I think right now you are seeing kind of the fruits of everyone's labour for the past few months.
That was a very good way of avoiding my question. Who impressed you?
Who do I think's done a really good job? I guess I'm gonna go through now and work out who have I bought products from recently.
That would be a good measure, yeah.
Where have I put my own money when I've been doing it? Well, look, I think, food and drink is interesting. So, Ocado, big brand here in the UK. I've been shopping with Ocado for some time. They, again, kind of caught off guard right at the beginning. They've got their act together right now. I can get extensive vegan ranges on there, which is what I want to do. They've definitely kind of moved that kind of stuff forwards. I'm certainly looking at what I'm going to be buying for Christmas, and I can suddenly now get all of that when I might have needed to kind of track it down somewhere else. I was looking at the new Uniqlo collections which are coming out for Christmas. Lots of beautiful heat tech designed products which look cozy. They're going to fit into the kind of way that I'm dressing at the moment. So I think some of those big brands on that front have done really well. I'm a big interior lover, as anyone who follows me on Instagram knows, and I've been impressed by some of the digital kind of platforms who have pivoted to enable you to shop kind of affordable art online. And I think in a world where we're perhaps not spending so much money on clothes and things, but we are, our entire lives are in the four walls of our home, it's become more important to do that, and to be able to do it in an affordable way, I think that's fantastic. So things like Partnership Editions have done a really good job on that, the affordable art fair, where we can suddenly, track down new art that's going to make, our homes that little bit more beautiful when we spend so much time in them.
All of your examples kind of bear out what you said earlier. It's businesses that are accelerating the existing positions against the trends that you've been forecasting, that you kind of reference there. I wonder, being cooped up all this year, is it also giving you ambitions about where you want to go next year, and when you get the opportunity to travel? What are your thoughts about where that's going to be different or exciting going forwards?
Look, I think I'm someone who has actually travelled this year. I'm an explorer at heart, and the minute any kind of lockdown restrictions disappeared, I got myself out of this house and still went and explored the world, but just maybe not quite as far afield as I normally do. But I do think, I, like many other people, are spending their evenings at the moment searching for where we're going to go on holiday next year, because I cannot, quite frankly, wait to see the beach or, warm weather again in a different country. I think people are going to be very conscious of that, though. I don't think everyone will have that attitude. I think lots of people are planning whether they will put their money, their deposits down now. I'm not so sure about. I don't think there will be the multiple holidays that people have had in the past. So I think that kind of future travel, lots of those travel agencies, hotels are having to rethink how they're going to entice people back, make them feel safe and secure. do it in an affordable way. We published a white paper called The Value Shift during this, and our perception as consumers of what is value has changed a lot through this. It's not just about things being inexpensive. It's not about the kind of buy one, get one free that we might have waited for in the past, or the discount. It's making us feel like we're getting more for our money, that a business is as invested in our experience as we are. And I think consumers will be looking for that. So if I'm going to visit your area of the world, if I'm going to visit your city, if I'm going to visit your hotel, how are you going to make me feel really good about that in a year when I'm going to be very conscious of how much money I have to spend? And therefore, when I spend it, I want the the return on that to be so much more than it might have needed to be in past years.
And of course, that's in the context of the topics of climate change and sustainability remain urgent and important. And, how much do you think that some of the changes that have been forced by circumstance are going to stick in terms of people's behaviour around particularly sustainability? And what do you think that brands are really going to make a difference to that, or are they still in this zone of kind of denial and lip service?
So I could talk about this particular topic for hours and hours on end. Right at the beginning of this, and you kind of see this in a recession environment, people start thinking much more about price, right? And we've had years of people talking about how important sustainability is. And very quickly I saw this shift, which was, okay, well, we're worried about how much money we've got now. All the headlines about recessions, we're going to have less. Therefore, all I'm going to worry about is price. And business is also going, well, and now it's a question between saving jobs or being environmentally friendly. I'm going to try and save jobs. But that was that kind of snap panic that we saw about many of those attitudes in the early days. What's also happened is that kind of conversation has shifted a lot recently, and people have kind of come back to thinking, okay, well, as I'm pivoting my business strategies, as I'm changing what am I going to do, can I do that in a way which is good, not just for this consumer who's fearful about their safety, who's fearful about their financial position, but can I do it in a way that's also good for the planet? And I'm always an optimist on this front, that businesses will do the right thing. I think they need a lot of support, and perhaps even more support now. But, we had, a year when Greta Thunberg was on the front page everywhere. Forest fires were making, those were the headline news, and that all changed because of COVID. But already you're beginning to see that coming back, and, change in leadership in countries who are going to re-sign up, we hope, to, environmental treaties and things like that. I think there is cause for optimism, but there's also a huge amount of work. And the consumer needs to take some of the responsibility as well. When they're going to be conscious about how they spend their money, they have the opportunity to spend it with businesses and brands who are doing the right thing by people and by the planet.
Of course, the murder of George Floyd brought a lot more focus on diversity and inclusion this year. What actions have you taken as a consequence at WGSN?
It was a very tough time, especially for my teams in North America, but further around the world, and there have been protests on all manner of political fronts in lots of the countries where we have large teams. It was a timely reminder, let me say. I've always been very, very proud of how diverse the WGSN community is, but it was a wake-up call that I can be proud of it, but not necessarily all of my teams see the same diversity that I do. And so we quickly looked in a very focused way at how could we make a difference both internally, but also how can we lead and help the industries that rely on WGSN to help them navigate the future. So one of the kind of external facing piece of work we did was setting up a mentorship scheme called Future Makers. And we are now mentoring people from a very diverse range of backgrounds. We've matched them with some of the most brilliant people within WGSN, and the success stories coming from that already are just so heartwarming. If you want to see more of them, you can read all about them on the WGSN blog, WGSN Insider, and also on our social media platforms. But we had thousands of entries from across the globe of young creatives who were struggling to get their first foot on that rung of that ladder, and we've enabled them to go faster by matching them with the very best people that we can. Internally, we've really been looking at the analysis that we produce in the reports on our subscription platform, and we've created a glossary to ensure that the terminology that we're using is appropriate, but also therefore helping the clients that use our information so that they're getting this stuff right as well. And that is constantly evolving. We're working with academics, we're working with absolute experts in their field. And I think this is just the very start of what we hope is, moving ourselves forward as a company, but also moving the industries that work with us. And we've been holding lots of, listening sessions internally as well. So communities within WGSN listening to what they have to say, both about their experiences working here, but also about their experiences working in companies in the industries. Again, those design industries that are so part of our community, and how can we make it better for them here? How can we attract amazing talent from very different backgrounds? Because the more we do that, and I can see it every day, the better we are as a business to a better place to work, but also a better place to create the right kind of information.
Looking back on the year as CEO, what was your personal highlight this year?
Oh my goodness, that's an amazing question. I think probably, and you touched upon it earlier, we relaunched our lifestyle and interiors platform, and we replatformed our fashion platform, which is just a colossal piece of work. And, there wasn't a kind of team across WGSN that wasn't involved in that, from our translation teams through to our engineers, our product marketing, absolutely everyone was involved. And it was very quietly done on Halloween. Team worked throughout the weekend, and normally any relaunch, and as someone who has relaunched many brands and worked on many, many platforms, normally that would have kind of killed half of us off, and it didn't. We just did it very quietly. Clients are very happy, feedback's fantastic. You can, read our reports on mobile so much better. You can share our content better. You can get much better data-led analysis as a consequence of it. And it was just done with minimal fuss, and that was lovely. But I think probably overall, it's just been this amazing resilience that the teams have shown, through hard times and, and the good times as well. But in a world where none of us have seen each other now really in person since March, everyone still feels very connected. Everyone makes the effort. And, we check in with each other, and people are going through all sorts of different things. And it feels like we're doing that as, one big community, which is amazing.
What do you think you've learned from this, diabolical year?
I think the remote, on a practical front, my former head of product had worked in a large global organisation, and he always used to say to me that he felt that any meeting we ran where someone wasn't in the office, we should all be doing it via our computers. And I love being with people. So I was like, well, look, we've got 4 of us in this office. Of course, that 4 should be in a meeting room together. But we haven't had any of that this year. We've all been in exactly the same position. Everyone's had Wi-Fi problems. Everyone's had computer problems. But it doesn't matter where in the world you are. We're all on an even playing field because we've got, the same square in front of us that we're seeing each other, or not if Wi-Fi is not playing up or not working as well as it could do that day. So I think, I've run a global organisation for a few years now, but I think I have run it more effectively this year because we haven't had some people in offices in certain parts of the world and others who aren't, or in different time zones. So I've learned a lot about how you can do that efficiently, but I've also learned a lot in terms of understanding the wider world and its impact on our people. There is no, real delineation between, home life and work life, and not just because we are working in our homes. That delineation has disappeared because their work is so much a part of it. And just by the very nature of what we do, we have people who are very, very passionate about design and creativity, and they bring all of that to work with them. So I've had to understand more about that as well to ensure that we give people a pass when they need it. And what I've seen is that's repaid tenfold over when they are able to focus on what they need to do at work.
You've just launched your Future Drivers 2023 and Future Innovation 2023 reports. What key things are you recommending business leaders focus on for 2023?
There's a huge amount in there, and actually I wrote a letter to all our exec subscribers last week, which is I read it and think how are they going to use it, but I also read it and think, well, what does this mean to me as a leader, and how can I take the best bits of it to be a better CEO? I think there's a lot in there about community, connectivity, and those aren't new terms. We talk about community all the time, but they're going to become so much more important, and we have seen that this year as well. Our sense of community has changed quite a lot. People are looking much, much closer to home. And that can be literally closer to home in the villages, towns or cities that you live, but also the countries we are. We haven't travelled quite so much. We are aware of the choices that we make and the impact that has on the community around us. And, coming back to the protests that you talked about, people are doing that because they want to see change where they are. They want to know that what they do has a positive impact on how they are able to live their lives, but also, their children and their grandchildren afterwards. So I think how we create communities internally in the offices or in the workplaces we have, if we're not in offices, which we may well not be for some time to come, but also how do we create community with the people who use our services. That we a few years ago talked about the local vist as a kind of tribe and their importance this year. And we've really seen that happen. And I think that also is going to continue to evolve a lot. And even if you're running, a multiple, conglomerate selling products across the world, you've got to think about how will that affect the community where it is sold and the people who are going to buy it in that area. So I think that's really important. We talked about, these years being the kind of age of connectivity. We've had to understand and utilise technology in ways that we just hadn't in the past. And, that's thrown up areas where they don't work as well as we would like them to do. But again, coming back to those brands that have been successful, they are the ones who make our digital choices and our digital life really easy, really, really simple. And I think, we had probably a decade when it was, choice is king. We want as much choice as possible. That's definitely declining. We are still time poor. All those people who said they had so much time on their hands during the pandemic and were cooking sourdough bread, I have no idea who they are. No one I've actually spoken to had more time. Everyone had less. We want brands and businesses to make our lives simpler, and we want that simplicity to flow through everything else as well. So I think those are two really, really important things. But technology is moving apace. We're not the only company who had to up our game during this year, and I think that's going to be very important. Is your technology as good as it can be, and are you making the choices that the consumer is going to think about as easy as you possibly can?
And that's my final question. So other than smashing your budget, what do you really want WGSN to crack in 2021?
I want us to make sure that the insight that we deliver is better than anyone else's in the world. And I want our clients, wherever they are in the world, to understand what it means for them to be successful where they are. This year has been one of, survive or die, really, for companies. If you've managed to make it through this year, fantastic. So how are you going to build back better? Now, I know build back better is being used by every single politician at the moment, which means it's resorting to cliche already, but put that aside for 1 minute. How can other businesses take all the resilience they've learned, all the great stuff of this new way of working, and use it as a proper reset? I don't think we need to go back to old habits, even if they were the right old habits in the past. Why would we go back to that? We've learned so much about how you can work this year. We've learned so much about how you live a slightly different life. We've learned ways to be more environmentally friendly, even if they were imposed upon us. So I want us to take the best of everything that's come out of 2020, despite it being a pretty horrific year, and use that to ensure that we're better, that the people in our wider design community are better as well. And I think if we do that, then we'll be set up for good success in the next decade.
I'm sure you'll deliver that too. Thank you very much, Carla.
Thank you, David. I hope you found some of that insightful and interesting. Thank you again for tuning in. We'll be back again in 2021 with new interviews, new insights, and much, much more. In the meantime, do head over to WGSN.com, where you can find out how to access all of our reports and our ongoing analysis. Thank you to David for taking the time out to quiz me, to our podcast producer, Roland Bodenham, and again, thank you for listening. I hope the rest of 2020 treats you well, and look forward to chatting more with you all next year.